For a few April days in San Francisco, a neighborhood built on survival starts to look almost unreal. Pink banners ripple between concrete malls and old community buildings. Drums hit hard enough to shake the sidewalks. Children in bright kimono weave past anime shops and mochi stalls. A portable structure weighing more than 1,000 pounds surges through the street on human shoulders. From a distance, it looks like a simple spring festival. But the real story begins here, because California's cherry blossom celebration is not just about flowers. It is about memory, rebuilding, identity, and the way a city turns history into a living public spectacle. In 2026, that story unfolds once again in San Francisco's Japantown during the 59th Northern California Cherry Blossom Festival, held across 2 weekends in mid-April. This is not a quiet garden event hidden behind fences. It spills into streets, plazas, malls, stages, community rooms, food lanes, and parade routes. And that is exactly what makes this festival different. The backdrop is one of the last 3 officially recognized Japantowns left in the United States, and by many accounts the largest and oldest of them. Here, spring is not only seen in blossoms, it is heard in taiko rhythms, smelled in grilling food, and felt in the movement of thousands of people crossing the neighborhood from morning to night. At first glance, San Francisco's Japantown feels like a surprising place for such a festival. This is not Kyoto or Tokyo. It is the Western edition, framed by city blocks, apartment buildings, transit lines, and the familiar gray-blue light of the Bay. Yet every April, the neighborhood shifts. Red and pink festival banners decorate the streets. The Peace Pagoda rises above the center like a visual anchor, even in a year like 2026 when nearby renovation work changes the flow of the main gathering areas. The Japan Center malls, Buchanan Street, Post Street, Sutter Street, and the surrounding sidewalks become a stage set for one of the largest cherry blossom festivals outside Japan. The festival's roots go back to a very specific historical moment. According to festival records, the first celebration took place in March 1968, just after the opening of the Japan Trade Center, now known as the Japan Center Malls. That timing mattered. The event did not appear out of nowhere as a decorative seasonal fair. It emerged during a period when Japanese and Japanese-American communities in San Francisco were rebuilding social life, commercial life, and public visibility after the devastation of wartime incarceration and the disruptions that followed World War II. A group of business and community leaders saw culture not as something private and fading, but as a bridge powerful enough to revive a neighborhood. That post-war context is essential because without it, the festival can seem lighter than it really is. Before the war, Japantown had already become a center of Japanese immigrant life. During the wartime removal and incarceration of Japanese Americans, that world was broken apart. Families lost homes, businesses, routines, and local continuity. After the war, some returned and rebuilt, but the social landscape had changed. By the late 1960s, a public festival centered on Japanese and Japanese-American culture was doing more than entertaining visitors. It was helping reassert presence. It was saying this community is still here, still visible, still contributing to the city, and still shaping its own future. The choice of cherry blossoms also carries layered meaning. In Japanese culture, Sakura has long been associated with spring, renewal, beauty, and the briefness of life. In a public American city setting, those meanings travel and adapt. Here, the blossoms become a seasonal symbol, but also a cultural one. The festival celebrates the arrival of spring, yes, but it also celebrates continuity between generations, ties between Japan and the United States, and the endurance of Japanese-American community life in Northern California. It is a cultural festival first, not simply a flower viewing event. And yet most people never notice this part until they walk deeper into the neighborhood and realize how much of the program is built around people, not petals. Who celebrates it? The simplest answer is everyone, but the more interesting answer is how many different worlds meet here at once. Japanese-American families return year after year, sometimes with grandparents who remember earlier decades of the festival and children seeing it for the first time. Local nonprofits run food stalls. Merchants rely on the crowds. Volunteers handle logistics, information booths, stage transitions, and cleanup. Dance schools, martial arts groups, taiko ensembles, tea practitioners, Calligraphers, flower arrangers, and youth organizations all take part. Tourists arrive for the spectacle. Neighbors from other parts of San Francisco wander in for lunch and stay for hours. Sister city groups and visiting performers add another layer. The result is not a single audience, but a temporary city within the city. There is also a strong intergenerational structure holding the whole thing together. The festival's Queen program, for example, is not merely pageantry. It has long functioned as a leadership and mentorship path for young women in the community, connecting public representation with volunteerism, speech, service, and civic identity. Boy Scout troops march in the parade. Preschool groups appear. Seniors are honored. Longtime activists and cultural figures are recognized as community marshals. In 2026, the parade welcomes comedian Atsuko Okatsuka as Grand Marshal, alongside community figures including Roy and PJ Hirabayashi, known for their decades of work in taiko, and Steve Nakajo, a major force in preserving Japantown itself. That combination says a lot about the festival's values. Art, humor, activism, memory, and neighborhood leadership all belong in the same procession. Long before the crowds arrive, the festival begins in a less visible way. Planning stretches over months. Committees coordinate streets, permits, stages, security, vendors, performers, sponsors, and parade units. Volunteers map booths and route power cables. Nonprofit organizations prepare menus, order ingredients, and organize staff because the food bazaar is not just about feeding visitors. It is often a fundraiser for community work. Artisans prepare jewelry, textiles, ceramics, paper goods, and cultural crafts for outdoor market stalls. Musicians rehearse. Dance groups steam costumes and check props. Community rooms are scheduled for demonstrations, workshops, and exhibitions. Even the practical details tell a story of care. In 2026, preparations carry another twist. The beloved Peace Plaza area remains under renovation, forcing the festival to adapt rather than pause. And this is where things become more interesting, because instead of weakening the event, that shift reveals how flexible and community-built it really is. The usual center of gravity spreads toward Webster Street and the Japanese Cultural and Community Center. Stages move, crowd patterns change. Sutter Street gains a stronger role. The festival reorganizes itself around the available space while keeping the same spirit. A visitor may just notice different walking paths. Organizers see months of problem-solving transformed into something seamless. Then there are the details that only become visible in the final days. Trucks roll in, temporary barricades appear, booth frames rise from bare pavement, folding tables become ticket counters, display cases, or food prep stations. Signs for arts and crafts, children's activities, and information booths are fixed into place. Coolers arrive. Beer garden equipment is checked. Stage sound systems are tested. At one corner, volunteers assemble maps and schedules. At another, drummers tune skins and tighten straps. The neighborhood begins to look like it is inhaling before a performance. Even before a single official program begins, you can feel that the streets are preparing to hold something much larger than everyday traffic. Early on festival morning, Japantown feels split between calm and anticipation. The air is cool, often touched by San Francisco fog. Storefront glass reflects pink banners and the first moving figures in happy coats, staff badges, work gloves, and rolling carts. Food teams start first because steaming broth, grilling meat, frying snacks, and shaping sweets take time. The smell of soy, sugar, oil, and charcoal begins to drift down Webster Street. In community spaces, ikebana flowers are arranged with precision. Calligraphy brushes are set out. Tea utensils are placed in order. Origami paper stacks wait untouched. Children's activity tables sit clean and bright for a few more quiet minutes. By late morning, the mood changes fast. Families arrive with strollers. Young adults show up in coordinated streetwear, vintage kimono, or cosplay. Visitors step out of buses and ride shares and orient themselves using the Peace Pagoda, Post and Buchanan, or the Japan Center entrances. Cameras come up everywhere. People queue for food before they have even decided what to see first. A first-time visitor might expect a single central stage and a clear linear program. But this festival works more like a network. One path leads to the arts and crafts area. Another leads to live music. Inside, community rooms host tea gatherings, go matches, sword displays, flower arrangement, dolls, and calligraphy. The whole neighborhood asks you to wander. That wandering is part of the experience. On one side of the festival, you hear classical instruments or see traditional dance in layered costume, with sleeves, obi, and footwear moving in careful rhythm. On another, a modern band plays to a younger crowd near the street stage. Nearby, a child folds paper into cranes. A few steps later, someone watches a tea demonstration. Then comes the food bazaar, where the mood changes again. Here the sounds are louder, the lines denser, the decisions more urgent. Udon, sushi, grilled skewers, sweet treats, snacks, cold drinks, and festival staples pull people from every direction. What looks casual from a distance is actually one of the major engines of the entire event. A lesser-known fact is that many of the food booths are run by local nonprofit groups, which gives the food court a different meaning. It is not just commerce, it is community fundraising disguised as irresistible lunch. That is why the atmosphere around the stalls feels so personal. The people serving you may also be volunteers supporting youth programs, cultural organizations, or neighborhood causes. The same is true across the festival. The craft booths are not random souvenirs. Many are carefully selected Japanese and Asian-inspired artisans. The Children's Village is not an afterthought. It is an intentional space where younger generations can encounter culture through play, making, touching, and trying. Visually, the festival thrives on contrast. Cherry blossom imagery appears everywhere, but the flowers share the frame with things that are distinctly urban and distinctly Californian. Pink petals and red lantern-style banners hang near traffic lights and storefronts. Traditional garments move past claw machine arcades, manga shops, and ramen counters. The textures are rich: silk kimono, cotton happy coats, polished drums, lacquered objects, paper crafts, denim jackets, camera straps, and plastic cups sweating in the afternoon sun. This is not a preserved museum district. It is a living neighborhood where heritage and contemporary life are constantly in conversation. And that tension gives the footage its energy. The main performance areas deepen that feeling. In a normal year, the George Yamasaki Jr. stage at Peace Plaza is a major visual hub. In 2026, because of the renovation, more attention shifts to the Webster Street stage and indoor venues at the Japanese Cultural and Community Center. The result is a festival that feels a little more spread out, a little more exploratory. You don't just stand in one place and watch. You circulate. You discover a taiko set after leaving a craft exhibit. You turn a corner and find a martial arts demonstration. You pass into the mall and suddenly hear a completely different tone. Quieter, more focused, more intimate. The parade day brings another level of anticipation, because by then the festival has been building toward its most public image. The Grand Parade is not staged only inside Japantown. It begins at Civic Center Plaza, then moves up Polk Street to Post Street, and ends in Japantown around Post and Fillmore. That route matters. It physically connects central San Francisco to the neighborhood, carrying the festival through the wider city before delivering it into its cultural heart. Crowds gather early along the sidewalks, choosing camera angles, claiming curb space, and scanning the distance for the first sound of drums or the first flash of costume color. When the parade starts, the whole mood tightens. You first notice rhythm before you notice form. Taiko arrives like a heartbeat scaled up for a city block. Then come dancers in motion, classical and folk groups whose sleeves, fans, and patterned fabric ripple with each step. Floats carry festival courts, community representatives, and honored guests. Scout troops march with upright seriousness. Cosplayers add another layer, reminding everyone that Japanese cultural influence in California now stretches from inherited tradition to contemporary pop imagination. The crowd reacts differently to each group. Some clap, some point out details to children, some simply film, trying to keep up with a moving line of color and sound. One of the things that makes this parade special is how many kinds of Japanese American life it can hold at once. Schools, nonprofits, civic leaders, artists, sister city organizations, and neighborhood institutions all appear in the same sequence. You are not watching a single polished performance company. You are watching a cross-section of community representation moving through public space. That can feel almost ordinary if you are standing there in the sun, eating festival food. But step back, and it is remarkable. A neighborhood once threatened by erasure now sends its culture marching down major streets with total confidence. Then comes the festival image many people remember longest, the mikoshi. In Japanese tradition, a mikoshi is a portable structure carried during festival processions. Historically, it is associated with moving through the streets as part of communal celebration. In San Francisco, the most dramatic version is the Taru Mikoshi, the parade finale that has been part of the event since the beginning. It is not small, and it is not symbolic in some distant way. It is physical, loud, unstable looking, and overwhelming in the best possible sense. Built with stacked sake barrels and crowned by a phoenix, it weighs over 1,000 pounds and requires a large team of carriers to move. This is the peak moment, and the reason is obvious the second it turns into view. The crowd's attention shifts instantly. The carriers move in sync, shoulders pressed under weight, steps coordinated, bodies leaning with effort. The structure sways. The street tightens around it. Energy rises from spectators and carriers together. It is part labor, part performance, part endurance event, part public ritual. Even viewers who know nothing about the history behind it understand that they are seeing the emotional climax. The parade has many beautiful sections, but the mikoshi feels different. It has force. It feels earned. It gathers the festival's ideas of cooperation and visibility into one unforgettable moving object. In 2026, there is another layer to that story. Festival organizers also highlight the activation of a Kanda mikoshi, gifted from Tokyo's Kanda Maojin Shrine, and mark a special pre-parade purification ceremony connected with that object and with cherry trees along Osaka Way before renovation work reshapes the area. For longtime followers of the festival, details like that matter. They reveal how international ties, local stewardship, and neighborhood change all continue to shape the event. Visitors may only see a dramatic visual. Organizers and community historians see a living archive, where each year adds another chapter instead of merely repeating the last one. Away from the parade route, the rest of the festival continues to pulse. Some visitors never leave the food lines. Others spend hours drifting from performance to performance. In one room, someone studies brushstrokes in Japanese calligraphy. In another, flower arrangers turn a few branches and blooms into careful sculptural balance. Tea gatherings slow time down. A Go Club table creates a pocket of intense silence inside all the noise. Children's activities keep families grounded between major events. A sensory-safe space in the East Mall offers a quieter option for attendees who need distance from the crowd. A small but meaningful sign of how modern festivals are learning to welcome people more thoughtfully. That modern relevance is one reason the Cherry Blossom Festival still matters. It is a major tourism draw, bringing more than 200,000 visitors across the event and directing them into local shops, restaurants, hotels, and neighborhood institutions. But reducing it to tourism would miss the point. The festival also reinforces community identity in a city where cultural districts face constant pressure from economics, redevelopment, and changing demographics. For Japantown, visibility is survival. A crowded April weekend does more than boost sales. It reminds the region that this neighborhood is not an abstract heritage site. It is active, contested, creative, and worth protecting. Local businesses feel that directly. Restaurants run at full speed. Gift shops and bookstores receive visitors who might never have entered otherwise. Small merchants selling tea sets, manga, snacks, stationery, ceramics, beauty goods, and crafts benefit from the traffic. Community organizations gain exposure, donors, and future participants. Cultural institutions meet people who may come back later for programs beyond festival season. A visitor who arrives for Blossom imagery might leave knowing where to take a class, where to volunteer, where to buy Japanese books, or where to bring family next month. In that way, the festival acts like a gateway. It turns curiosity into relationship. For younger generations, that gateway may be even more important. Not every young attendee arrives with a strong inherited connection to Japanese American history. Some come through anime, fashion, street culture, music, or social media. The festival makes room for that. Cosplay in the parade, pop culture storefronts, kawaii aesthetics, and contemporary music on street stages sit beside much older art forms. That mix is not a dilution of tradition. It is part of how culture stays alive in diaspora. Heritage survives not only through preservation, but through adaptation, reinterpretation, and the willingness to let multiple entry points exist at the same time. The flowers themselves remain powerful, but in San Francisco they work differently than people expect. This is not a city where you always stand under endless tunnels of bloom. Sometimes the blossom is an image on a banner, a branch in an arrangement, a tree on Osaka Way, a motif on fabric, packaging, or signage. Yet that might be more fitting than a simple blossom fantasy. The Sakura here is less a single visual event and more a theme carried through the neighborhood. It appears in color, pattern, symbolism, and timing. Spring is not just hanging above the crowd, it is moving through it, stitched into sleeves, printed on posters, and folded into the logic of the festival itself. As afternoon turns toward evening, the light changes, and so does the mood. San Francisco's sun softens. Shadows stretch across Post Street. The crowds are still dense, but slightly looser now, more satisfied, less hurried. People compare purchases, finish drinks, and sit wherever they can find space. Stages wind down. Drums echo a little farther in the cooling air. The neighborhood begins to glow rather than blaze. Shop signs become more visible. The pagoda and plaza area take on a different presence. What looked festive at noon now feels reflective, almost cinematic, as if the whole district is exhaling after holding so much motion. By night, the official program may be closing, but the atmosphere does not collapse all at once. It tapers. Booths begin to come down. Vendors count what is left. Volunteers stack chairs, gather signs, coil cables, and pick up the day's evidence of abundance. Families head home with tired children. Groups of friends drift into Japantown restaurants for one last bowl of ramen, sushi dinner, dessert, or late conversation. The neighborhood returns gradually to itself, though never quite to the version it was before the morning. For anyone who spent the day here, even the ordinary corners now carry residue. Drum beats, color, heat, memory. And that may be the deepest reason this festival keeps drawing people back. On the surface, it offers exactly what the title promises. Sakura season, spring streets, a grand parade, a full visual event. But underneath that surface, it offers something far more durable. It shows how a cultural district can hold history without turning still. It shows how traditions can travel across an ocean, survive political violence, adapt to California streets, and remain meaningful to people born generations later. It shows how celebration itself can become a form of preservation. So when the final crowd thins and the last festival banner stirs in the evening wind, what remains is not just the image of cherry blossoms in America. What remains is the feeling of a neighborhood telling its own story out loud. In San Francisco's Japantown, spring is not only a season, it is a public act of remembrance, a community reunion, an economic lifeline, a classroom, a stage, and a promise that culture can be shared without being flattened. That is why the California Cherry Blossom Festival still matters, and that is why, year after year, people keep returning to watch the streets bloom.